Deborah, I can also send you, I do have a PowerPoint, which Isabel kindly set all this up, but I thought, I want to make myself kind of present here. So I'm just going to dive in. Shall I?
Yes, go for it. We're so happy to have you here.
Okay.
And you can write on there, whoever's leaving. If anybody.
This is a lot of material that I have learned kind of through trial, and much that I also got by applying entrepreneurial principles to my life as an artist and vice versa. I'll start off by just saying I think actually artists and entrepreneurs are the same coin. Like, it's two sides of the same coin. Artists and entrepreneurs are dreamers. We think very big and we think broadly, and I think we both think about making the world a better place. And entrepreneurs tend to do that by trying to re-examine and change systems, and artists do it through the soul, right? So a lot of the business language that I've learned as an entrepreneur, I see as applying to my artistic side and vice versa. So anyone here who is coming at it from an artistic side, just know you have a lot of value to add to the business world in your creative thinking, and I encourage you to just make friends. Talk to people who are in the business sector, because there's a lot that we can learn from each other. But to start, and yeah, I just prepared this so that you would have like a hard copy of something to take away. These are my three fundamental principles. I like to think that part one of finding your way as an entrepreneur is finding your voice, finding who you are, and digging deep into that. And so I think that there are three key questions to that. And the first comes from my experience as a dog owner. Any of you who have had a dog, you may know that some dogs, not all dogs, but many dogs will just go after their ball, right? You throw the ball, they go after the ball, they come back, they're panting, they want to go get the ball again. And they just keep going and keep going and keep going. I had a dog like this, and I would worry that the dog was going to pass out, but it just would keep going no matter what after that ball. And it made me think to myself, who am I and what is my ball? What is the thing that I would forget I was hungry for, forget about sleep, go after with so much passion and singular focus that it really, that I could lose track of everything else. And I think that passion is what is needed. I often have folks say, well, okay, I love advocacy, or I want to make change. And I think that those are obviously the best of intentions, but we want to get as granular as we can about the ball. For me, a ball is definitely women's empowerment. I'm very interested and will lose sight of everything else in my tunnel vision toward women's equality, equal pay, fighting discrimination, et cetera, et cetera. That is a ball specifically. For some people, it can be children's education, or eliminating hunger, or there can be many, many facets to this. So I ask each of you, what is your ball? And you're probably here because on some level the arts are your ball, right? I mean, it takes that kind of singular vision to stay up Googling and YouTubing singers, and you forget, and all of a sudden it's 2 a.m. But are there any other balls like that in your life that you were that passionate about? That's really important. And these questions, by the way, are questions that evolve. I mean, some of the things that I think were my burning passions at 20 were not necessarily my burning passions at 30. But there are some things that are continuing and congruent. And I mean, women's equality has been something I've been passionate about for many years. So I guess before going on to the next one, does anyone have a ball that they want to share? Does anyone know of something that they are extremely passionate about that would be outside of performing? And if not, that's totally okay. I don't want to put anyone on the spot. It could also be I've had dogs, as I mentioned. I care deeply for animal rights. That's another ball of mine. Like fiercely an advocate for that. So I invite you to think outside of the box. It may not be something that's advocacy related. It may be culinary. It may be friendships. It may be learning another language. I mean, you have a wonderful student who is a Russian major, right?
Mhm.
Russian and economics. Maybe for her, that is another ball. So really just sort of identifying where your passions lie outside of performing. So I won't put anyone on the spot. But this
Unless
next
you want to speak up. Do you have?
yeah, if
anything?
you are willing to jump in,
It's funny because I don't think that performing is my ball. Like,
Okay.
It's like not my favorite part about music.
Okay.
My favorite part about music is like the kind of like more like cerebral, like analytical like side of
Uh-huh,
it. Like it makes
okay.
me really happy when I can like understand the piece through like the theoretical lens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And other than that, like, I don't know, I was just trying to think about everything I do and like wondering, I feel like I'm passionate about everything I do, but like I think that the things that like really push me forward are like bringing people together, along a common goal.
Yeah.
Like that sounds vague, but yeah.
No. There's a theory out there. I didn't include it, but I will send it to Deborah. That there are 4 kinds of people, and I'm gonna butcher this, but it's like there are owls, there are dolphins, I think beavers and foxes, and that's like the categories, right? And I think it's the dolphins that are the conveners, and they're very caring, and they want to bring people together and network. And if they know, oh, I know this other person over here has the same passion as this person, I want to connect them. So that is a huge skill, and it's the self-awareness and self-analysis. I mean, ultimately, finding your ball, so to speak, is about understanding yourself. And I happen to know IR, international relations, is something you're very passionate about. So then understanding that lens, you've already mentioned to me theoretical analysis, right? Strategy. Well, those elements play deeply into both IR and, let's say, political science, right? So maybe that specific angle of it. And then I would dig deeper into that. Okay, so if I'm looking at international relations and I'm looking at strategy, am I interested in it on a geographical level? Am I interested in Latin America? Am I interested in it from a sort of horizontal level, like socioeconomic backgrounds, migration? Am I interested in it from the lens of something like women's rights or refugees or any of those kind of more social lenses? And just starting to take notes on all of this and understanding, because once you hit that hot spot, that's the thing. I always think of it like if you're on Google or on your phone, how, I don't know if this happens to anyone else, but you stay up really late and you're Googling the thing and then another video comes up and you're like, oh, but I have to watch that. And then all of a sudden another one, and you just completely lose track of time. You're fully engaged. There's nothing boring about it. That's your ball. That's the thing, right? And so I encourage you to just dig deeper into that and think to yourself, like for me, when I dug in that question of IR, I'm really specifically interested in U.S.-China relations. And I'm interested in better understanding and fostering mutual understanding between these two cultures and how culturally different we can be, but also our similarities. And that might seem super specific, right? But I went from a place of like, I'm interested in the world. I'm interested in IR. And so with years and years of digging at that question, I was finally able to find something very focused. That's why you're in school too, is to like explore. It doesn't happen overnight. So another question to consider is, who are your 5? So this is going to seem like an obvious question. Okay, well, who are the 5 people I admire the most, or the 5 people I want to be around the most? But my question here is, who are the 5 people that you interact with the most every single day? So that may be the barista at the Commons, right? At the I forget what the name of the building is there, but or the Starbucks or wherever you go. It may be your roommate, if you have a roommate. It may be your mom. But I'm pretty sure we could all look at our phones right now and take a look at, like, who are the 5 people I'm texting with the most or I'm seeing the most, And those 5 people are the people that are influencing you the most. And they may not be the 5 people you want to be influenced by the most. You know, you may have a friend who is someone who drains your energy a lot or doesn't necessarily support your interests. Or you may be in a relationship with someone who is, you know, maybe holding you back, or you're giving a lot to that relationship. So the question really is to, first of all, understand who are those 5 people that you're having the most interaction with. And then really analyze that and say, you know, are these people that believe in me unconditionally? Are these people that bring out the best in me? Maybe 2 of them are, maybe 3 of them not so much. Okay, so how can I reimagine that? Do I need to broaden my circle of people? But really taking a look at it, because that energy and that mood that you're getting from other people influences you in ways that you may not even be aware of. And when we're really thinking about building a better life, a better future, I think that being aware of surrounding yourself with people who bring out the best in you is critical. And I know for me, when I first asked myself this question, I was surprised to really like go, oh yeah, actually I do talk to the barista at my Starbucks a lot. Like in terms of like real interaction, not Instagram. I don't mean like Instagram or just texting. I mean actual interaction that this person like is someone you talk to every day, right? And sees you. And so yeah, it can be a tricky question, especially during COVID times. And then lastly, I think this is kind of a part 3. So once you know what you're most passionate about, or at least have a shape and an idea of that, I think you have to ask yourself, where is this happening? So I like these analogies that like if someone is very, very into Broadway and musical theater singing, and that is their passion, they will stay up till 4 in the morning. Well, there's one place for you, you know, after you've done your schooling, you should go, even if it's for 2 weeks, even if it's for 5 days. Feel it, live it, breathe it, experience that energy. Go to the place, be around it. If, you know, Greek architecture and anthropology is your thing, go, get on a plane, find a way to be there and be immersed in it. You know, IR, maybe you're curious about the UN. Find a way to visit that building, get in there, see the flags, be around that energy. And I think that living those experiences is something that can either reinforce that passion or maybe make you question it. But living it and being surrounded by it is extremely important. So these are kind of like introductory, bigger theme questions. And I just sort of wanted to offer that because this advice is advice I always come back to. Before we move forward, does anyone have any questions on these 3 concepts? Yeah? Okay. Great. There's going to be lots of time for questions. So now I'm going to invite you to flip the page. And along the lines with that part 1 of who are you is the part 2 self-evaluation. What we're really digging at here is our own work of getting to know ourselves, getting to understand ourselves. And I think ultimately any teacher will want you to be able to teach yourself. You know, in those times when you're in the wings right before to go on stage, you may not have that teacher, that supportive person there with you, but you can still sort of be your own teacher and be your own advocate. So, does anyone know what a SWOT? Well, I have it on the page, but did anyone know what a SWOT analysis is before coming in? Good. Good. This is like a term that I come back to all the time. So SWOT means strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I want you to just spend some time right now thinking about this. So I will sort of demo on me. If I were to do a quick SWOT analysis on myself, let's say as a singer, because again, these points that we're going to go through, they apply as singers and they apply as entrepreneurs. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. A strength for me is I speak 5 languages fairly fluently. That's a strength. You know, when I pick up Poulenc or Mahler, well, I can understand the words and have, let's say, an advantage with diction and so forth that maybe someone who wasn't as familiar with the language. Okay, that's a strength. A weakness, there are many, but let's just say that I've always felt a little bit insecure about my lower passaggio. That's a weakness. I don't feel as confident about it, right? And that's an area that, as a mezzo-soprano, is very important for me to have well addressed. So that's a technical thing. An opportunity. Well, I would say an opportunity would be my voice fits the role of Carmen pretty well. And that is very fortunate because it's a role I really like to play and it's in my fach and so forth. So that's a great opportunity because that opera gets done all the time. A threat. I think a threat for me is that I'm very tall. I'm 5'10", and when it comes to casting me in an opera, if a casting director was considering me for, let's say, Carmen, but they really want a tenor who is maybe shorter, said casting director may not want that look. Now they may, but they may not. So that's one lens to look at it under. But I can look at the SWOT analysis on a number of levels. On a broader level, I think a strength is I'm very hardworking. I think a weakness is I'm not necessarily the most able person. I don't necessarily pick things up very quickly. I have some dyslexia. It's hard for me. But I make up with it in that I'm very, very hard worker. I'll put in the hours. Opportunities. Well, I think there are a broad amount of opportunities for any hard worker, right? Whether it's in performance or picking up other skills. Threats is always the most challenging category for us to think about. Threats could have to do with competition in ways that we have not thought about it. So, let me ask you a question. What do you think? And I guess you're our token singer for today. Who would you say is your biggest competition as a performer? As a performer, just think outside the box. It's kind of a trick question, but as a performer, as an entertainer, let's even make it broader. Who do you think is your biggest threat out there?
Oh my god. Like, I feel like it would, I don't know. Like, you mean other people, like, who sing at Wellesley, or?
Well, okay, so I'll walk you through this, because this is a trick question.
Yeah.
But normally when I ask this question, you know, sort of at first we'll think that way, right? Other people, maybe colleagues who are studying or in the same position, and then I'll say think broader. And so maybe you'll get to a place where you say, well, Renee Fleming, right? Or Anna Netrebko, or someone very famous as an opera singer. I think, no, that's not it. So my opinion, this is my personal opinion, I think one of the biggest threats to any aspiring young musical performer and student are cats. And hear me out. Cat videos on YouTube, and I have the statistics, cat videos on YouTube far surpass the most popular Pavarotti video, which is the most popular opera video on YouTube is Pavarotti. And cat videos have done far, 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 far better. Cats have no academic training, they have no student loans, they don't speak other languages, and yet cat videos are here to stay. So when I say think of your threats as being outside of the box, it may not be the way that you're thinking of a threat. But we have to really think very, very broadly today about what's out there. So does that make sense? It's conceptual, and I know I'm being a little bit cheeky, but
So I could say
it's just this idea that you might not really think that your competition for entertainment are cats, but people have a choice to go to the theater, to spend money, get dressed up, get in their car, or to stay home and click through that YouTube feed watching very entertaining cat videos.
So I could say like late stage capitalism as a threat to young artists.
Yes. Well, we'll have to have another very long conversation on yes. But ultimately, you know, this is about communicating, right? And I think that that's where we come back is what is your role? What is your goal? What do you really care about? You've identified for me that you care about bringing people together. And I think there's so many ways to do that creatively, and that is something very, very needed. So we could do a SWOT analysis on that. What would be some strengths? What are some weaknesses? What are some opportunities? I mean, anything with social media is an opportunity for that. But it's also probably a threat, right? So just, I think the SWOT analysis can literally be applied to anything. And at the risk of putting you on the spot as well, do you have anything maybe you could add in terms of how do you think of SWOT analysis as a useful tool? When have you used it?
I used it in strategic plan, like as an executive director of an organization, where you have to think about the strengths and weaknesses that are within the organization, and then the opportunities that are external and the threats that are external, like the economy or whatever.
Right. And I think that's how most people utilize this analytic tool. But again, going to your interest in analysis, I mean, it can be used at any point. If I'm thinking about making an investment, okay, well, what are the strengths, weakness, opportunities, or threats of acquiring this? But generally speaking, I invite you to do this analysis for yourself. And then we're going to look at part 2 here. Now, part 2, and I apologize, I think when I converted the format, it changed this a little bit, so I'll clean that up when I send that to you, Deborah. But I really like this artist self-inventory. Full disclosure, I got a good part of this, not all of it, from Opera America years ago. I'm not sure that they still offer this printout that they used to offer. But here you will see a number of criteria. And I just want you to maybe take a moment and read through it and think about how you would evaluate yourself. 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. Yes, there's an artistic category, technique, expressiveness, but as you can see, that's only one of many of the things here. Communication skills are critical. I can't tell you how many times I think that public speaking and writing are skills that any musician should have, you know, very high up there with their artistic skills. And then other areas, language, certainly in your case, I would also say like IR or other areas of knowledge, you know. And so I'll let you read through this, but I do want to draw your attention to the section of entrepreneurial skills. So when we think about entrepreneurship, it's also about being able to analyze a situation and have some realistic rationale behind the analysis. So ability to identify problems rationally. Okay, are you someone who exaggerates a problem? Are you someone who can say, okay, that looks like a homework assignment that's going to take me 6 to 7 hours to do, and you're not underestimating it. You want to sort of give yourself that buffer within that thinking, but that it's realistic. Again, with realistic workload, or to say, hey, I'm gonna take on this new song cycle, and this is gonna take me at least 20 hours to just learn the diction, the rhythm, and the notes, and so that you can actually start to plan your time in an acute way. Ability to set goals, also, you know. It's one thing to have a goal that's for 10 years out, but can you set some goals that are for 3 months out? We'll be talking about that as well. Ability to manage finances. This is huge, and this is an area where it's probably for like an entire other session, but I have been collecting a number of worksheets on financial management that I'd love to send to you. I feel that this is the most under talked about area for any entrepreneur or artist, is understanding what are you going to be responsible for after school. What are rents like? I often hear people say, well, I'm going to move to New York. Great. How much is the price of rent in New York? And then, probably $1,000 or $2,000. And it's like, no. Do your homework. what is that gonna be like? What are taxes like? What is health insurance like? So I have some really, really good handouts. I didn't wanna bombard you guys with printing too much or anything. But having a very realistic assessment of saying, this is what this option is going to cost. Willingness to travel, I also put that on there because we're living in an era right now where, you might get a dream job and it's in Singapore. Are you willing to go there? Understanding your own willingness to do that. There's no right or wrong answer here. So yeah, any questions on any of this? I find this a really good comprehensive tool, and I invite you to take a moment and evaluate yourself. I actually have come back to this for 20 years, just like going back and saying, okay, I've forgotten about this one, and my score here is a little bit low. I've also asked teachers who knew me very well to help me, and I've seen that sometimes I will underestimate myself, and sometimes I will overestimate myself. And having someone I can bounce that back and forth with, who knows me well as as personally but also professionally, is very, very useful. So again, I cut this out of some kind of form 25 years ago or something, and I've kept it for a long time. I share that with you.
I have a question that occurs to me.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on here, a lot to sort of consider, and I guess what I'm thinking about is prioritizing and how you can figure out at what point in your career where certain things need to be prioritized. For example, you were talking about the ability to manage finances and networking. So I look at those; they're just on top of each other. And I think about advising young entrepreneurs, young artists coming out of an undergraduate. Where is the priority? I think more and more this idea of avoiding going into debt is a good thing, right?
Yes.
And I think about at a certain point, I think I used to think it was really important to be in a place where you could network. But yet, if you can actually go to a program or learn your craft in a place where you're not going into debt early on, perhaps that is the priority. I don't know if you could talk a little bit about figuring out how to prioritize.
I mean, I think, Deborah, there's no right or wrong way, but in my experience, what helps is to first, get that lay of the land and say, okay, these are the things I'm good at, strengths. These are the things that I need to work on. It may be that someone has a sort of cushy financial situation from parents or from savings, but a very limited network, or vice versa. Right? And so understanding sort of where you are in the moment, and that's why I say, come back to, I do this once a year at least, just to say, okay, yeah, I've got a little money in savings now, but gosh, I really want to be better known in Europe or whatever it is, I should do some networking there. That said, I do think there is a hierarchy of priorities. And for me, trying to avoid debt and staying fiscally responsible has been a very, very high priority. And I can't stress enough how many people, unfortunately, I've seen come out of school lacking the necessary skills to do the budgeting, taking on more debt, and later, let's say in their 30s or 40s, finding themselves wishing that they had had more information or made different choices. That's a bleak picture, but let me support that picture. In 2008, prior to the stock crash, prior to COVID, the estimated amount in the United States of master's students in music, so musicians out there with a master's who could make a living, right, to make it, was less than 2%. And I'm absolutely sure that number is less now. And of that, less than 2% of students, that means 98% of students with a master's were not exclusively making their living with their craft. Of that 2% making it, the average was $32,500 a year. You can't live in New York City on that. Like literally, you will be in debt and acquiring debt just unless you have a miraculous situation where you're living rent-free or something like that. And that average was for 5 years. So that is a very bleak picture. And knowing that and understanding that, I feel it's imperative for anybody who hopes to make their living exclusively on art to have a plan, and especially to have a fiscal plan. It's just, otherwise you could be looking at acquiring hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt and not knowing how you're gonna pay that back. So.
Can you write that to my kids?
Both of them.
And I mean, I think just how easily you're able to call up that information, I think that's why she's a good entrepreneur, because she has that knowledge really is quite powerful. And it doesn't mean you can't have a life in art, you do, right?
Right.
It's just being aware and being realistic.
It's the awareness. I mean,
is just powerful. You cannot live in denial, and to be able to develop lots of avenues, right?
and there's so many ways, I will also follow up with this, but there's so many ways to gain skills and insight that will reduce your risk of financial instability. What we're going to come to the term ROI in a minute, so I won't jump the gun there, but that are beneficial. And one I'll point out, just which I did just 2 years ago. Harvard Business School offers online courses. They're reasonably priced, surprisingly. There is a course called the CORE, which stands for Credential of Readiness. It is 3 classes, financial accounting, business analytics, and economics. So 3 full lessons. The normal version, I think, is like 4 or 5 months, and the accelerated version is 3.5 months. I believe it's roughly $2,000. But that's for all 3 classes. There are exams. There is a final exam. It is super hard, probably the hardest thing I've ever done. It is called kind of a mini master's in business or pre-master's, and I wish I had done that in my 20s. It was one of the single best investments. ROI is return on investment, so one of the single best ROIs I've ever had for that money. Completely online, and not only that, I met people from all over the world. Some of my close friends came out of that program. It was a phenomenal experience. So that's one tip that I'll give is like, you know, if you have a few weeks or a summer free and you can afford it, and they do offer scholarships also, so it might even go down from that $2,000, invest in that. You will come out with such solid skills. It's also something you can put on your resume. It's quite well regarded, this credential, and can also open the door for other job possibilities. And there are lots of things like that. That happens to be a Harvard thing. There are many, many such possibilities that you can do with a little bit of time and a little bit of money that will carry you through forever, I think, for a very long time. If tips like that are useful too, let me know, because I have a lot of tips like that. So any questions on this self-inventory? Does anybody see any potential additional categories that we could add to this? Because I think there are a lot. And I would say that from the time that this came out, in the age of dinosaurs that I came up in, to now, there's a whole digital piece, right? There's a digital component. So I don't know if I would call it entrepreneurial skills, but maybe social media skills or internet skills, let's say. Can you set up an Instagram or a Facebook or a Twitter? Do you have the ability to create a website? Do you have the ability to put a recording on YouTube? Can you create a newsletter? Sustaining those communications, that is a huge area that we're seeing increasingly important. LinkedIn, to get into the job market, that wasn't around when this when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. Okay, how am I doing on time here? So let me now jump to a couple of key things. And actually, yes, I apologize, or I isn't on there, but we are gonna talk about that. So this third concept here is super important. In fact, if there's only one thing you take away from today, it's this. UVP, unique value proposition. This is a business term. Probably Isabel is familiar with it. I'm guessing, maybe. No? UVP is basically what makes you unique. And companies use this all the time, right? Sensodyne will say, well, our UVP is that we treat sensitive teeth, right? That's what makes them different. And different opera companies, you know, from that perspective, will have their own UVP. Maybe some companies do more children's opera or do more English opera. Opera Theater St. Louis, I think they do all their productions in English, so that's a UVP. But I'm interested in what is your UVP? What distinguishes you from your competition? And I'll share with you that this was something that took me a very, 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 very long time to come to terms with. My mom is Mexican, my dad is Bulgarian, so I always was, as I think of it, born with these cultural confusion and with these questions, and all I wanted to do was fit in my whole life. I didn't want to be unique. I didn't want to be different. I wanted to fit in. But as I got older, as I developed as an artist and as an entrepreneur, I understood that actually my unique upbringing in Spanish helped me to understand Mexican communities where my family was, and helped me to have a broader understanding of Latin American or Spanish-speaking countries. My European upbringing from my father also gave me some things, and the uniqueness of the combination, my experience as a firstborn American, also helped me to empathize and understand with other people who were facing the same challenges. And so ultimately, I actually feel like that is my unique value proposition, was something that I was born into. And it's led me to founding the Canales project, which I'm gonna shift gears to talk about. So understanding my UVP was actually what led me on my path as an entrepreneur. In 2016, I founded the organization, the Canales Project, and it was really just born of a desire to use my voice both literally and figuratively to create positive social impact. I knew I wanted to do some work, something that went beyond what I had the chance to do as an opera singer. But I also, as I dug through these questions, and especially the questions on the first page, I realized that those kind of hot button emotional topics for me had to do with feeling like the other for so long, having gone through this situation where I just wanted to fit in, and music was the place where I fit in. But as an adult, I understood, well, gosh, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who had to check that other box my whole life. There's so many of us. In fact, in this country right now, we are shifting that. We're seeing this shift from what I think of as the other to the all. By 2043, you may know that we're anticipating that minorities will become the majority in this country. And that is already the case in California, for instance, with citizens under 18 years old. So we're already seeing those demographics shift. And what is happening largely as a result of that is a sort of clash of cultures, misunderstanding in communities, and a lot of the social strife that I think we've seen in the last 4, 5, 6 years. I believe strongly that music can be a tool to better understand cultures, and that is what led me to starting my organization. And I'm sort of trying to bring this full circle here so that you see the journey. It was first asking all of these questions about what is my ball, what do I really care about, who are the people that I can depend on, and where is the place, where is my home? I'm very proud to be a firstborn American. I want to make a difference here. So understanding all of these things, going through a process of self-evaluation, and finally coming out and saying, well, this is the thing I care about the most, and starting an organization. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I started a not-for-profit because I think at that time I didn't feel like there was one I could necessarily join that was talking about these issues. Now there are a lot. I mean, it's very interesting to me that in just like 5-6 short years we've gotten into talking about identity politics. That term didn't even really exist when I started this. But I started with a very simple mission, which was to use music and conversation to foster music and conversation, to explore identity through music and conversation. So I wanted to really talk about identity, what we have in common, create those bridges, and then be able to talk about what makes us different, and to use the power of music and culture and conversations to work our way through that. When I started, and I'll invite you to flip to the next page, I knew that I needed to have these 3 pieces resolved. And I must have worked on this for 2 years before I really had it honed, and I still go back to it all the time. The vision. So I just told you my mission statement. We can start there. Some people inverse them. My mission statement is to explore identity through music and through conversation. That's what I'm hoping to do. I could push at that. How do I know if I've done that? How do I know if I've accomplished that? What are the metrics? How do I hope to do that? Is it through concerts? Is it through workshops? What are the mediums? And then the vision is sort of the broader picture. What's the dream? How do I really hope that that's going to be accomplished? Do I want to do it alone? Do I want to do it with a group? Where do I want to do it? So understanding the vision, understanding the mission are absolutely fundamental to any entrepreneur's journey, but also understanding the goals. And this sort of goes back to what I was just talking about. I actually really strongly feel that I would be the first to talk anyone out of founding an NGO. It is a lot of work. It's so much work. And there's so many ways to make a difference without going that path now, especially. But just to give you a broad sense, is anyone thinking about starting an NGO? I don't know if that's like on the table. Okay, so I won't get into that too much, but basically, an NGO stands for nonprofit organization, and in order to get that label, you have to go through a process with the U.S. government of creating an application, stating your case, why is what you do important to society, why is what you do different, and you also have a board of directors that is fiscally responsible for that organization. And I think that's a really important point, because you may not want to start an NGO, but one day you might be asked to join the board of an NGO. And in doing so, you're taking on a tax liability and a fiduciary responsibility to that organization. And that's, that means you really, really care, and you carry that. And then I'll talk about the next steps. But there are many ways to do that work. Let's say that you have an idea. You want to do something around, I'll go back to women's empowerment. You don't have to start an NGO to do that. You can have your own initiative. And at the point at which money starts to be a factor, if you want the tax benefit of being a not-for-profit, because any donations that a not-for-profit gets are a tax write-off. That is the one benefit to having that status. But you can also do what's called now sort of umbrellaing or incorporating with a fiscal sponsor. So a fiscal sponsor is an organization that will allow you to be under that umbrella of that benefit of the not-for-profit status for a small fee. And generally, fiscal sponsors will take 5 to 8% is usually a good rate. Fractured Atlas is a great example of one that works in the arts space. And you simply apply to consideration. It's usually, if you have a good plan, a good mission, a good vision, a fairly simple process. It's not a government process, it's not a legal process. So I tell anybody who's interested in maybe dabbing their foot in, first go through a fiscal agent. So much easier, and I can tell you so many organizations that stayed in that position for even 10 years or more without incorporating themselves as a not-for-profit, because it's just kind of a win-win all around. So I won't go too much into starting a not-for-profit, given what's here, although I am always happy to answer those questions. But what I did want to dive into in the time we have is, let's say that you have an idea and you want to test that idea out. Does anybody have an idea? It could be, hey, I want to do a food drive to raise funds for Ukrainian refugees who have had to leave the country. Let's take that idea. That's a very timely idea, right? How can you do that in a way that's not starting your not-for-profit? Any ideas? I have kind of given some of it up here. One option is that you can go through, given that there's a financial portion of it, you can go through a fiscal agent organization. You can also work with institutions, and that is the best way to get something done, particularly in a university setting. At a university, there's so many opportunities for students to work with faculty, to work with organizations that are here ready to support you with these kinds of ideas. And also that will give you the mentorship and the guidance to learn. And that is like the other major takeaway today, is just the benefit of having a mentor, the benefit of having someone who can talk you through your mission, your vision in those ways. Without having to get a whole board of directors together, without having to, assemble all of the pieces. But the experience that you will learn from taking a project like that on will then be able to guide you for the next direction. So I always say that if you have an entrepreneurial idea, it's always good to test the water out. And this kind of goes for any idea. Pick some low-hanging fruit. Do something that's actionable and relatively simple to achieve. And that can be, a lemonade stand for little kids. Like, it doesn't have to be, super sophisticated. I think we've all grown up with the entrepreneurial spirit. If you've grown up in the United States, that's very much in the DNA here. But just understanding that you can take an idea with a little bit of time and maybe a community of effort and do something actionable that will give you the experience to move to the next step. I also wanted to just touch upon the different options. There's NGO being, I think, the hardest and the most work to achieve. There's the fiscal sponsorship of sort of umbrelling something, and from the financial perspective, you're going to end up paying 5, 6 to 8% for that service. There's also other ways to incorporate, let's say. And these are really important things to think about. One is, if you wanted to start something, you can start it under what's called a B Corp. And a B Corp was developed as an alternative, because let's say that you have an idea and it's going to give you a profit. A B Corp is still a for-profit. It's not a not-for-profit. But it says, okay, with the profit that you get, this is going to be something for social benefit. So, for instance, from what I recall, and they might have changed it, Lululemon is actually a B Corp. There are corporations that work under that umbrella, and there are also much smaller organizations that go under that umbrella because it's much, much easier to set up. And there's also the option of an LLC. And I wanted to bring this up today because most people don't know that you can conduct your work as an artist or as an entrepreneur as an LLC. And I think it's extremely important for anyone who is doing work that's not, within an institution, salaried, to consider an LLC, because there are protective measures you can take. You can acquire your own insurance, for example, for the LLC. You can have different benefits under an LLC umbrella that's different. So when I do any of my contracts, given that I'm independent, rather than do them as Carla, I prefer to do them under my LLC because I have insurance under that, because I have a sort of supportive network. And I think that that's great if you're an individual artist and you're doing contracts as artists, and I think it works if you're a writer or anything that you're doing in a portfolio style. So I encourage people to look at that option.
How do you establish yourself in that way?
Super easy. I think it's about $50 in an hour of time. I can send you some links. I know how to do it in New York, and I think it's different per state, but it is done in a day, and anywhere from, I've heard of it being as little as $15 to $20 to roughly $50 or $75 annually. And it just has so many benefits. I know that for me, when I learned about it, I was like, oh yeah, this is a no-brainer. Like, everything should be done in this way. And I think a lot of artists are now starting to like turn on to that. Yeah, I'm not sure in Massachusetts what the rules are, but I can look into it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Curious. I've heard of it before, but I don't really know that much about the process.
Yeah, and I think you know, there are different like insurance. I talk a lot about it with artists because especially now with force majeure, with all of the things that are happening in our industry, I think it's important for us to talk more about the measures that we can take. And also if you get sick, or if a flight is canceled, or you know, there's so much that's out of our control. So anyone who's working as a contractor, and another sort of piece to consider here, taking a step out, humans are living longer. Retirement age is shifting upward. The chances are that you will have more than one career in your life. It may be that, you know, for the first 20 or 30 years you're doing one thing and then you switch. I know I'm in that category. And the switches sometimes are dramatic and sometimes they're not. But very, very few people will stay in one job for the length until retirement at 80 plus, which is, you know, now people are living longer. It's just going on longer. So, you know, the more that you can learn and understand what the options are fiscally, how to be fiscally responsible. That's why I go back to the Harvard course and or anything that will teach you about financial accounting, economics, basic ways to talk about savings also, retirement savings, health insurance, all of these things. That knowledge just will carry with you for the rest of your life. It's so important. You know, it could be basic books like Susie Orman. I recommend Susie Orman to everyone. I think, you know, she is, you know, has her own style of thinking, but so great about the advice that she gives in those books. And I think at the very least, anyone in their 20s needs to read one of those books. And we all know the facts. You know, if you start investing before the age of 25 and you're just contributing $50 a month or $100 a year to that investment, that adds up by the time you're 65. And so all of those small, seemingly small steps, you will be thanking yourself for later in life. That's for sure. I'm covering a lot and I'm talking a lot, and normally I would pause for more questions.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions to this point? Do you have any questions?
Not right now. I just like have like a lot of thoughts. I think in general, but I don't want to like take time. If we're
No, please,
or-
please.
No, do it. This is, you're lucky you have space to do it.
Well, okay. So this is, I'm sorry to like put Serena on the spot, but so both of us participated in the like Madeline Albright Institute over winter session.
Great.
And my group, her group did data privacy, and my group founded a civil society organization in Colombia to counter the use of small arms. We did fake it, but I read through like so many tax forms in order to like compile like a financial like we had to write a grant proposal to, I think we picked the Ford Foundation.
Yeah.
To provide us with funding to do like the work that we were like supposedly gonna do. And so I was like kind of combing through all the like the 990s to figure out like what like comparable organizations had in terms of their like finances. So not that I wanted to like start an NGO, but I feel like I have like some like literacy in like what the inner workings of them are, and like at the same time I worked for the development office of the San Francisco Ballet last summer, and so like learning kind of how like the behind the scenes works in terms of like arts like administration and like fundraising was very, very like enlightening. And just like in general, I think those are like two things that I feel can come together for the goal of like allowing like more young people to be engaged in like kind of fine art and like performance art. And like it was really funny because I was like the token like young person in the office, and they would make me like do all the social media
Yeah.
for like doing for like promoting their gala and all that sort of thing. But I just like am just I don't know, like this isn't a question, it's just like a thought, but like I like wonder where like this will all like continue to go in the future
Yeah.
when like everyone my age kind of like enters those roles.
The roles in admin, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I think right now we're seeing definite shifts because there are generations that are alive and working that did not grow up with internet. I mean, I'm for one, I didn't, I think I wrote my first email maybe when I was in college or grad school.
When we
Like,
didn't have cell phones until
Yeah.
college. Right?
so, I mean, and of course there are generations older than me, and I think that they generally look to the younger generations and think, oh, social media, oh, do this, oh, do that. And so the first thing that I would identify there is that there needs to be more intergenerational dialogue, just in general. There's a lot that the younger generation can learn from an older generation and vice versa. And I think right now we have sort of stigmatized the two groups in general, these are very general terms, as being just very separate in their experiences. If you're referring also to like getting more young people into performances, I sort of heard that as a thread. That's the $1 million question. I mean, that's really a big challenge. I have controversial views on this, but I will share them here, and not everyone agrees with me. I am really highly skeptical of leadership in the arts institutions. We look at the Metropolitan Opera. That is the largest budget arts institution in the world from the last account I checked. Roughly $360 million annual budget. 360. That's about $1 million a day on average that Peter Geld, the head of the organization, is accountable for fundraising. Of that budget, and so, okay, let's just start with that piece. It's an artistic institution in New York City, and if you look at what they're offering the city and the community, it's just, to me, does not warrant a not-for-profit status, which they have. Having gone through that process, if you're gonna call yourself a not-for-profit, it means that you have an intrinsic and necessary value to the community. And I don't see them using enough of that $360 million budget to give back. In fact, their educational programming is very, very limited and questionable. Furthermore, again, prior to the pandemic, the house was full about 66% of the time, or 66% capacity, which means that about a third of the house is not full on average. And of that 66%, a large percent of it is tourists. So again, I'm thinking, well, what is the community engagement there? Of that $360 million budget, half roughly comes from the board. So their board is giving half. So, if you look at those numbers, like if I were to analyze those numbers, I'm going, well, this sounds a lot more like a country club to me than it does a not-for-profit organization that's serving a community. You could look at, a much larger organization, granted, but look at American Red Cross, or a local organization, if you will, and then you look at the services that they're providing. So if I were a donor, or even just a citizen, I would really have to ask myself, who should I be funding? So I'm trying to offer a different perspective on this, but I think that, yes, please.
So I am in the arts administration field and have been for, I'm running years. And I've seen, and also on both coasts. So I would say there is a league of
Yes.
privileged institutions like, and mainly Western
Yeah.
white, basically, you know, genres
Yeah.
that have a sort of privilege, you
Yeah.
know, that their genre has a privilege, and
Yeah.
the institutions have a privilege because of the origins and the longevity and all
Right.
of that, and the donors. But there is also a bazillion other levels of arts organizations, from the smallest. I was executive director of Puppet Show Place Theater, which is
Oh, I love that.
teeny tiny, you know.
Wonderful.
But it's serving the community, it's serving kids, and
Yeah.
we're trying to find ways to make things more engaged
Yeah.
and to bring in more. Well, that's really youth, but
Mhm.
also, you know, more young people into the
Yeah,
administrative
yeah.
part. And then there are consortia in New England. There's New
Yeah.
England Foundation for the Arts,
Yeah.
which sort of hosts a lot of consortia of all different size and focus
Yeah. Yeah.
of organizations. And there's those of us who are that much older, and then there's people coming into the field all the time. And now there are some really exciting.
Yeah.
There's a program at Wesleyan called I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically, you know, curating, performing, you know, time-based arts,
Huh.
and how that, because there's roles in arts administration that are artistic roles, that
Oh,
are
yeah.
curators, that are
Oh, yeah.
directors of programs, that are,
Yeah.
you know, the people who write the program books or whatever. And there are arts organizations that deal with exclusively non-Western genres, you know, and things like that. So just to say, it's a huge field, actually, and I think any interest in it, you know, I would say look to the smaller places.
Yes.
And you can learn a lot about the real nitty-gritty of
Yeah.
raising money and spending it well.
I'm so glad you said this. I mean, to me, that's exactly the lesson here. And in general, it's sort of the blue collar, if you will, arts organizations and artists. Because I could point also to the fees that someone like Anna Trebko gets paid versus, you know, incredible artists who are getting a fraction of that. And, you know, I'm always going to be the one like advocating for the blue collar. And this is my misgiving with these numbers from Metropolitan Opera. I mean, can you imagine $360 million? Like, can you imagine giving your former organization $1 million, right? Or
10,000 was a lot, you know? We were in debt when I started, and then we had $40,000 in the bank at the end of it. That was a success, you know?
Right. And so, you know, we have to sort of ask the bigger question there. I would hold the Metropolitan Opera in as accountable for, you know, if you're going to be using that budget, what are you doing for the community? And I think opera is a field at large, and symphonies and ballets, we sometimes call them the SOBs, right? They really need to be asking themselves the question of relevance and community. If they want to survive at that caliber of budgets, you know, we really need to think about, well, what exactly are they doing for communities? Now, I love my craft, I love my training, I love the art form, but part of the reason I went in this direction of entrepreneurship is because I was extremely frustrated by this. And I could see much smaller organizations that were the ones doing the work, that were so caring, that were so important in fostering that community. And so I couldn't agree more. I think if you have any interest in this, going in that direction for experience is super valuable. I also just want to go back to what you were saying about, so help me understand, you did do this work, or you didn't, like, or was it a project with the Albright Institute?
Yeah, so basically you're given like world problems and you have
Okay.
to like solve them in like a simulation sense, but
Got
you
it,
get like
got
3
it.
weeks to work on it.
Okay.
And yeah, we spent a lot of time.
What did you think of the grant process? Like when you looked at Ford Foundation, did you look into like the grants and, because that can also be an extremely intimidating
Yeah,
process.
we like picked the Ford Foundation from among various foundations that funded work that were like relevant to what we were doing. And like tried to, and I think that like we had like a bunch of criteria that like narrowed down at least like the type of money that we were looking for and something that was like in alignment with our goals.
Yeah. And given that you went through the simulation, would you be interested in bringing it to fruition now?
I mean, we met with an expert in, like an academic expert in the small arms trade, who had like a lot of connections in like Africa, and he was like, why aren't you doing this? Like your like internship should be like, you all just like go to Columbia and do it, and we were like, we're college students. I think we did interview one like expert who like works in the field, and he was like, and he thought that we were like PhD like students who had like already funded this organization, which is kind of crazy.
Wow.
We have not done it yet. We have to graduate first.
But maybe what you could do is find a way to volunteer or utilize the education that you gain to add value to those organizations. I'm sure they would be incredibly grateful. And another thing that came to my mind, are you familiar with Pedro Reyes at all?
No.
I hope that you will look him up. Pedro Reyes is a Mexican sort of conceptual artist, and his first kind of big project was called Disarm. And he acquired guns from the Mexican government that had been basically taken out of drug cartels, and he turned them into musical instruments. And it's an incredible project. In fact, he was at MIT for a little while, and now he's doing something on nuclear. He's incredible. I had the privilege of interviewing him a couple weeks ago, and a very accessible person. But what he has done in this space, and with this concept of really sculpture, as he calls it, like changing something that has one form into something that has not only a different form, but a different meaning altogether and a different social value. It's very kind of philosophical, but beautiful. I encourage you to check out his work.
Yeah, of course.
Like the last thing I put on here is about goals. And I think fundamentally, like without getting too deep into entrepreneurship, you have to have goals. What differentiates a goal from a dream is the minute you take that dream and write it as a goal. Because then you have the intention to make it actionable. And I believe so much in that process. I know Deborah and I were talking about this recently. When I was in school, my teacher made me keep a journal, like a notebook. And in that notebook, I would write down all my exercises, but I would also write down the life lessons I learned. And everything you're seeing here comes from those journals, which are so precious to me. I've like copied them, recopied them by hand because I'm so afraid of losing them. And all of this here, it translates whether you are an entrepreneur or an artist. Do your analysis, set your intentions, have your goals. Even if you never go into having an organization with a board of directors, those 5 that I referred to on the first page, that's your board. Who are the people that you can call at 2 in the morning and say, I'm in trouble, or I'm crying and I'm having a life crisis? I mean, who are the people that believe in you more than you believe in yourself? Those are the people you want to surround yourself with. Those are the people that are going to have your back, that can give you honest analysis, and that can help you achieve your goals. And I think understanding what you have in your life is the first step. Then understanding where is it that you want to go. How do you want to make those changes? Maybe you don't have any people in your life that you can call at 2 in the morning. There have been times in my life I didn't, and I knew I wanted that. Then setting the intention and the goal, right? And I think once you're able to do that, then you start the process again. Okay, what do I need to analyze? What do I need to work on to set the goals? And basically, I think that's life. There's never an arrival point. As an entrepreneur, I like to describe it in a way my husband has shared with me. It's like learning to fly a plane and building the plane at the same time. I'm constantly like rethinking and recalibrating and what am I doing? But at the same time, I'm never bored. And you do eventually have to like learn about the burnout and all of those things, which I didn't want to get into today, but it is very, very important to have the self-care, the self-reflection, and those people that can say to you, hey, you're going too hard, you're pushing too much, take a break, relax. So these are just kind of like, again, overall lessons. I wanted to give you something concrete for today. I also will send, especially the financial, the fiscal worksheets. I think simulations are great, by the way. Thanks for bringing that up. I learned a lot through that, and if anybody is ever interested in those, I have many examples and sites and things like that that help. But if there's more that you can do while you're here, that firsthand knowledge is incredible. So I definitely encourage that a lot. We have some time left. I really want to spend some time and save some time for questions about IR, but does anyone have any other questions about anything that we've covered? I know it's been rather broad, but I hope that you can find ways to apply these principles.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. It gets us thinking and wanting to ask ourselves all these questions.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, and would you prefer to do some private session, or do you want to have it
I
open?
don't mind. I don't know. If you guys have places to go, like I feel like I just want to like ask you about a bunch of things.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
ask
mean,
away.
she's here, she's offering, I think,
Yeah.
go for it.
Please.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to like think of like you don't have to.
We
I have
Oh,
to, yeah, we should
yeah.
probably,
Yeah,
Thank you.